Why talk about this subject? Why talk about items that you can't can or can't safely can? If you've been doing any kind of food preservation, whether it's canning or whatnot, and you're trying to do it safe, you're following recipes, you tell people about what you've been reading or what you've learned, or I attended classes like to learn how to do this safely. And so if I talk to anybody about canning, if I say, well, you should not maybe put this in a jar or put that in a jar, and you often get the same response. So you often hear, I've been doing this for 30 years and nobody's ever gotten sick. I've never gotten sick. And it's probably true that probably nobody's ever gotten sick off of their food or whatnot. They've been very fortunate. But I try to explain to them, it's like anything else in life. Like, we've been going through 20, 30, 40 years of testing. And we have the ability, the capabilities now, the facilities that are able to test these foods that we're making, that we're putting in jars, and to ensure that they're safe. Just because nobody's gotten sick doesn't mean that it can't happen. And getting sick on something that you put in a jar can have some very serious consequences. So when I hear that, if I've been doing that for my entire life, I'll often say I know and try to explain a little bit and say, but when you know better, you do better. So, and then I will give them an example. Like, when I was a child, when I was a baby, there was no car seats. They didn't know anything about the safety of seatbelts. But through years of studies, through years of doing testing, the crash test dummies, we know now that putting kids in car seats and using seatbelts are safe. So we've changed the way we drive in a car. The same thing goes with canning. We know now things are safe, we know things are unsafe, and we need to adjust our practices, adjust our recipes accordingly to make sure that everything stays safe, to make sure that we don't get anybody sick. Let's talk about those items that are not really safe for pressure canning. So first of all, I talk about your flours and your cornstarch. So these are any type of thickening agents that you would add to the food that you're trying to prepare to make it a little bit thicker. So why can't we add those to foods that we're pressure canning? They can cause the foods that we're trying to prepare to thicken too quickly, or can also cause some clumping, either the flour cornstarch clumping or the food clumping if the thickening agent isn't working the way it's quite supposed to. Now, if we have these clumps, if we have a product that's too thick, it may cause an uneven heat distribution inside the product. It may not allow the pressure canner to achieve the optimal temperature to destroy those harmful bacteria. So no cornstarch or no flour inside of your products. So some other things as well that you shouldn't be putting in your products is your rice, your pasta, noodles. Any kinds of pastas or noodles should not be put in as well for the same reasons. They may not allow the heat to distribute evenly within the jars. So no pasta, no noodles. As well, I've talked about this before. So you have your salt. So this is table salt. So that's not allowed inside the jars when you're pressure canning. If you are adding salt to the recipes when you're cooking, and most recipes do call for salt, you need to add your pickling salt, your coarse salt, or your sea salt, not your regular table salt. Something else as well that you shouldn't be adding into your food when you're preparing it is barley. That's another one that doesn't allow for proper heat distribution throughout your foods. Another product, or group of products, I guess I should say, is your dairies. So your milk, your cream, your cheese, your cream cheese, your butter. All those ingredients are also not safe to can. For the heat distribution, for the canner to be able to do its job and to kill all those harmful bacteria, you cannot add dairy products to your jars. Finally, one more product that I want to talk about is maybe a little bit different from add-ons, but it is something here in Atlantic Canada that we see a lot of people putting in jars and pressure canning, and it's lobster. So lobster is one of those foods that there's just no way to safely preserve it in a jar unless you freeze it. They haven't been able, with all the tests, to find a way to safely preserve lobster. Anyway, the best way to have preserved lobster is frozen anyways. Now when I say lobster, I don't mean all seafoods, or so you can do clams, bar clams, crab, fish. All those foods are safe to process in a pressure canner. Just talking about lobster. That's the only one. I've talked about all kinds of things that you can't do. So hopefully there are some alternatives available out there, and yes, there is. So for thickening agents, one thing that you can safely use to thicken something, if you have a recipe that you'd want to thicken, or you want to make more of a gravy, or actually some recipes in those books do ask for a thickening agent, and it's clear gel starch. So clear gel starch is actually an approved thickening agent that can be used when you're canning, and you purchase this online. So you just go online, search it, you won't have any difficulty finding it. So this is an alternative to your flour and cornstarch. What can you do if you just have to have your pasta, your noodles, your rice inside of your recipe? Well, there's a couple things you can do. Either you can pressure can your soup without those items in and add them in afterwards, or you can make your soup like you usually do, and instead of pressure canning it, just freeze it. It's fine. You'll have your soup exactly the way you like it, and you won't be worried about getting anyone sick. You have to remember that at the end of the day, it would be great to be able to preserve all our favorite foods exactly the way we want to cook them in a jar. There are safety issues in doing that, and we do have to follow recipes to make sure that nobody gets sick. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you enjoy this content, don't be shy. Hit that subscribe button at the bottom of the page. Hit the bell and you'll get notifications when I do post new videos. Be sure to check out other videos that I have on my channel. I've got quite a few going on. And check back soon to see what other projects I'll have going on.